Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Leith. I'm the Executive Director of Columbia Center for the Arts, and I am here today with Sorcha Meek, a visual artist who is currently on exhibit in our gallery for the month of June in a show called Essential Ebb and Flow. You are welcome. Please to come visit us between 12 and 5 Monday through Tuesday. You can also see all the work online at columbiaarts.org. We are very happy to be here today. Sorcha is a good friend and someone I admire as an artist and a person, so I feel very lucky to be able to chat with her today about her work. Sorcha, you were pretty instrumental in getting the show together, and it is a show of 4 women with a sort of the general theme of water. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but water obviously plays a big role in your work sort of throughout, certainly your more recent work. So I'd like to talk about that. But before we get into that, I would like you to tell your story about how you became an artist.
Ooh, how many hours do you have?
Where to start? The highlights. Where you come from, and what, your influences, and how you got, moved.
Well, I was raised in Ireland. My mother was American. My father was a journalist, a writer, and a musician, Irish. And I was raised in a mixed family. My sister was adopted from Korea, and I was adopted from England, and my brothers were not. And so we were raised in a very sort of non-traditional Irish family. My mother started the first non-denominational Montessori school in Ireland, and that was kind of the beginning of my education. And so that school, from a very young age, really involved a lot of art and a lot of singing. It was integrated into the curriculum, and that was just very normal. And I think also, while I was growing up as a child, I was exposed to a lot of art. So I remember going with my mother to her friend's art studio. Her friend Chloe Fremantle was an artist, contemporary artist, and was showing work in New York. And I think I was about 10 years old at the time. And Chloe was an abstract artist. I mean, she was a painter. And I just remember seeing the work, and it just kind of blew my mind that I had never seen abstract art before. And to see this studio filled with abstract paintings and beautiful colors just really had a big impact on me. And then I decided, we moved to the States when I was 13. My parents split up, and I went to a school, a small alternative school for a couple of years, and then went to graduated from the public high school. And I wanted to experience that whole American sort of experience of going to a prom and going to a football game. I'd seen this type of thing on television and in movies, but never had experienced that in real life. And so that was interesting, and to have sort of the very small to go from a small school with meditating each morning before classes began, and a lot of outdoor education, to the traditional public American school system. So I think that was a really important, learning experience, and just having a perspective on education in general. I then went and got my BA in visual communication. It was to sort of have I would say, a way to support myself as not to just jump into trying to be a painter, and then I think not having some sort of an education where I could go out and get a job. And so I did that, and then I went on to Florence and did study art after doing graphic design. And I was working with 2 incredible artists. They're now they work as a duo, Rose and Claire, and they're both contemporary artists who show at the Marion Goodman Gallery to this day in South Africa. And they were amazing educators. So I started with a very traditional, our class was a cohort from all over the world, and we started with very traditional oil painting and techniques, portraiture, still life, and then went on to our last part of the course was contemporary art. And so they were really interested in using art as a medium for change in the world, and using art as a way to express ideas. And that, of course, had a huge impact on my work going forward. So that has always been, once I left Italy and moved to Seattle, and I worked as a teacher and also continued with my art career there. That has always been the case. This painting behind me, this is a really old painting that's about 25 years old, has the rope, which comes into the work that I still use today. And so over the years, I have really built up, I suppose, a vocabulary with the certain things that I use as symbolism in my work. And the rope is one that comes into some of the paintings in the show as well. So I don't know if you want to.
Well, I'm interested, I'm always fascinated how artists set up their practice. So you, when you left Florence and moved to Seattle, became a teacher and all that, were you in practice as an artist? Did you have a studio that you were regularly visiting? And is that something that has always been in play?
Yeah. So I've always had a studio. The only time I didn't have a studio was when my second daughter was born. She was a baby. We'd moved to Hood River, and I was trying to work out of our back bedroom, turn that into a studio. And it was terrible. It was a disaster. It was, the phone would ring. I suddenly realized I had no, underwear or socks. I had to go and do laundry, or, just, the sort of domestic every day. So I realized at that point that I really needed to get out of the house to continue with my art practice. And so my husband, Barry, who was a savior, he would watch the girls every Saturday, and I would go to this life drawing session over in the, it's above that little, what is the name of it? Not the Methodist, maybe the Methodist church. Anyway, so there was a life drawing session every Saturday. Years ago, John Bennett was the fellow who ran it. And I would go religiously. And for 3 hours, I would just go and sketch and draw from the model. And then a year later, when I finally was able to start the studio with Jane, actually, up in the old Alpini hut, we had our own studio spaces, and we started that print studio. I was able to get out of the back bedroom, and then I used all of those sketches from that year that I had done with John to create a whole series of work titled Being Human. And so that work at the time, there were these large monoprints with these very sort of loose gestural figurative drawings. And it was all about what it means to be human. And that once you take away the color of someone's skin, once you take away their religion or their race, underneath it all, we're actually more similar than not. And so on that level, we should all be able to connect as human beings. So that was a long time ago. And that was probably one of the first series that I did, where I was really trying to create a message. And I think part of that came from, my sister and I, we looked very different. Obviously, she was Korean, but we didn't feel any different at all. I mean, we absolutely felt that we were sisters. And it was kind of funny, because I remember occasionally sort of introducing someone, just assuming that they knew we were sisters because I thought that we looked alike, but obviously we didn't. We had our voices, our children couldn't tell us apart, on the telephone. And so for me, I think growing up in this kind of a multiracial family was part of that whole understanding of, just being human, treating people as they should be.
Boy, is that relevant in a big way today. I mean, it's just like it is the message right now that it's just so important that we all be like you in that regard, get more like you. Well, let's talk about that rope that's behind you. And also I'm going to bring up a piece of art that, I mean, it's what I'm hearing is a theme that you picked up at a young age from your family, and then also in your experience in Florence that is carried forward as this concept of humanity and what it is to you and how you express that through your art. And I'm going to bring up this piece of art called, oops, not that one, this one, which is, it has this rope, as you said earlier, in this piece, as well as the piece that's 25 years old behind you. So yeah. Is there a relationship with that and humanity, or your?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, that the whole idea behind the rope was that it comes from this idea that there is the decisions that we have made in the past will affect today, and the decisions that we make today will affect the future. And so when I think about that concept, it's not only on a personal level, but on a humanitarian level, and for anyone, you know, leader, everyday person, whatever, you know, that idea. It's funny, I was wondering, the rope comes originally from, you know, my love of riding and horses, and I spent 10 years of my life with a good friend who had a number of horses, and one of them really needed to be ridden, and she didn't have the time. And so there was a decade of my life where horses were a very big part of my life. And I still would love to do that. But I work too much. I'm the assistant director at New Vision School and a teacher. And so there had to be sort of a give and take. And so my free time is spent in my studio.
Well,
when I retire, I'll go back to horses.
Yeah. Yeah, but also, I mean, in this situation, also, when I think about you talking about how much you love horses, the rope is really what connects you to the horse too, which keeps you communicating with the horse, right? The relationship you have is the rope plays a big part in that.
Absolutely.
And in this piece, there's that same kind of thing. It's a continuum sort of connection of thoughts and actions and events and all that kind of stuff that you're portraying as a symbol.
Exactly.
In this very watery piece that, you know, is fluid and loose and ethereal, but you have this very specific taut defined rope going through the middle of it.
Yes, exactly. And I think you're exactly right. That rope is that connection when you're lunging a horse, when you're leading a horse. It's this very direct connection with something, for me, you know, a living being. And something that I love about horses is that they're a sort of fight or flight animal, and your relationship with a horse has to be based on trust. And so it's very real and very raw, and I love that. So the continuum piece really goes back to, you know, why did I choose the rope? Obviously, it's because that rope was something that was in my everyday life. Sorry, you're now getting to hear the recycle truck go by my front door.
We're keeping it real. Let's move into water then, because I mentioned earlier that you have pieces that throughout your career that where water plays a really big role. And in this particular exhibit, water is the theme that all of the artists brought into their work. Can you talk a little bit about that? Should I bring up the other piece, or would you like to talk about it?
Yeah, I can talk about that here.
Okay.
With this one. So yeah, this was probably 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. I started the water theme, and that came from actually Barry, my husband and I and our two girls were living in France for a year. And we took a trip. Two of our closest friends that we grew up with were going to Egypt to sail, to windsurf. And we're both big windsurfers. And so they asked us if we wanted to go with them and meet them there. And it was our summer vacation. And we thought, well, we're so far from Egypt, living in Hood River. If we're ever going to go, we should go now. So we took this trip, and we spent, it was, I think, 10 days, and we just spent that time. We were going to windsurf, but what happened was we started snorkeling, and it was in the Red Sea. And I remember this experience of just taking a breath with the snorkel and diving down and having what seemed like, maybe 1,000 little fish just envelop me. Not one of the fish touched me, but as I swam, they were coming through and passing me. And the sea life that we saw there was just incredible. There were seahorses, there were all sorts of fish. And so I started, just after that trip, it was so profound, and the color of the water was so incredible. And although we had gone to windsurf, it was being in the water and snorkeling that was by far the most, significant part of that whole experience. I went back home and just couldn't stop thinking about the color of the water and the feeling of the water. And then just hearing about how the Great Barrier Reef was being destroyed by pollution, and how our rivers are, and even here, the Columbia River with, various things upstream going into the water. And then, joining river keepers and just being very sort of aware of the importance of clean water for humanity, for people. And so when I thought about it, and I thought about wanting to do a body of work that would actually have some sort of a message, I just thought about, well, we come from water. If you think about how, humanity evolved, we come from water, we are water. So much of our actual physiology is made up of water, and we need water to survive, and everything around us is only alive because of water. And therefore, that series was titled Water is Life. And I think I mentioned in the previous interview that Water is Life slogan sort of had a new meaning a couple of years ago at Standing Rock. But this was a series that I'd started, 12 years ago. And the idea that, this is precious, and this is life, and this is vital. We cannot live without clean water. So.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to bring up another piece because I love it so. And also just to ask you about your influences, like what artists do you love to that you kind of follow, or that inspire you, whose work you think is?
One of the artists, a local artist, contemporary artist, whose work I really love is James Lavador. He shows out of PDX Gallery in Portland. He was actually, I think he was the founder of Crow Shadow. And he is alive and working today. And I remember years ago, he had a show at Maryhill Museum. And I went out to see the show. My friend Jean said, "Oh, you've got to see this guy's work." And I went out to see his work, and I was just blown away. It was the most beautiful work I'd seen, and it just had a huge impact on me. And he used a lot of drips in his work, and I had been doing that actually. When I think about my graduate show at the Art Institute, I remember using these the paint moving upwards on a portrait that I had done. And that for me was always a symbol of transitions. And then when you go through a change, or you've gone through something, even something traumatic or something incredible, you've sort of elevated your consciousness and you've transitioned into a new phase in life. Right. And so anyway, so I would have to say I'm a huge fan of James Lavador and his work. And he shows at PDX on each year, and it's very exciting for me to see his work.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, so Everybody, thank you so much for listening. It's such a treat to have you here, Sorcha, and I really appreciate your time and your words and us being able to talk about your art, which I so enjoy. And please, everybody, come visit if you'd like to see it live and in person for the rest of this month, or visit us online at columbiaarts.org. And if you guys have any questions or any interest in learning more about Sorcha, her website is sorchameek.com, correct? And it's, I've always said Sorcha, but I was looking on your website earlier and you have the sort of phonetic
I have tried and tried. Tried to make it easy for people.
Look like Sorcha, more like
yeah. It's how do you sort of phonetically say Sorcha?
I don't know, but I just, it took me a long time to get it to where I wanted it, and I'm owning it right now.
You got it, baby. No, you have it. You have it. It growing up with a Gaelic name.
Yes.
There are many
name. So
Sorcha, many things.
SORCHAMEEK.com, and you can see a lot more of her work, the water series we were just talking about, among some other works. And it's a treat to have you here, Sorcha. Thank you so much.
Leith, thank you so much. I really appreciate all that you've done. Yeah, it's very exciting. Thank you.